Technologies presents Weld Wednesday with AWS. Brought to you by the American Welding Society. And now your host, Jason Becker.
Gerald, good evening, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's honestly a pleasure to have you out here on the podcast. I know we've been chatting for a while. I think we met, 20... When was that? Probably about 2021?
Yeah, 2020 or 2021, right when you were I think down there at Valencia.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly how you came across me or I came across you, but
So I was
I think I'd seen some of your videos and you contacted me and I realized, hey, somebody famous contacted me.
It's the same guy. Yeah. I was looking at setting up an ATF, and I think I was doing a Weld Wednesday episode with Monica Farr, and she runs the foundation with AWS. And right after the podcast, I think she had said, if you need help setting that up, you need to reach out to Gerald Austin. He's a whiz with this stuff. And that's what I did. So I reached out to you and I was like, hey, is this Gerald? And, we got to chatting and everything. And yeah, you helped me set up the first ATF we had over there at Valencia. And it's a very impressive manual you put together, sir.
Yeah. That was quite a, I did it from scratch. And then I found out later that they were out there in the public domain for some of the schools that had done them through grants and stuff like that. But it all came off the top of my head. And so all the mistakes that are in there are not ones that I copied from someone else. They're bad ideas that I had.
They're my bad ideas.
Yeah.
No, it's a great manual because I did that because I guess if you apply for a grant, for certain things, once you're done with that grant, you have to release all that information becomes public knowledge. And so I looked at a few of them, a few of the QA manuals and stuff for setting up an ATF. And I was like, yeah, this just isn't going to work for what I have here at the school. And I don't think this is really compliant for what I'm looking at. And I got a hold of yours and I was like, wow, this is exactly what I needed. Because I started writing one from scratch and I was like, where do I stop?
Yeah. And that's how I had started. I actually started writing the manual before I actually get involved with becoming an ATF. I came up here to work for a college, left industry and came up and they said they wanted to be an ATF. And I'd been a welder testing geek and, welding geek for quite a while. And I'd written quality manuals for other stuff. I got up here with them and they said they want to do it. And I had a good chunk of a manual already done and, outlines and stuff like that. So it was, it was great to kind of finish that up on their dime, just to be honest with you. But it was it was done on their dime, but it was done on my dime.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was where I was employed and I had a reason to get it done for them, but it was all pretty much done at the house. But it was a scary event during the audit because, of course, this community college that I went to work for was wanting to become an ATF, and we've done spent this money for them to come in, and I'm new working with them, and here's my chance to shine. And the audit went great. The audit went really good, but I can say I was a little bit nervous about it because it was an opportunity to blow their $3,000 or whatever the fee was at the time.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I just went through my second audit. So the first one went really well, and it went a lot easier than I thought it would be. And because I was super nervous, very similar situation like you had. It's like, this isn't my money that, I'm playing with here to get this thing set up. So not that my job was on the line, but I was like, this is going to reflect very poorly on my credibility as a CWI, a welding inspector, an instructor, all the things that, this company thinks that I am. If I can't pass this audit, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm not going to hear the end of it. So, but luckily, I had Steve Snyder was my first audit. That was when he and I first met. He came in to do my audit. And, we went through the QA manual. We went through the welder testing portion of it, did the visual inspection after I had one of my other instructors come in and actually perform the weld test. So I monitored him the whole time. And then Steve just kind of supervised, while I was monitoring, got through the whole process, did the visual inspection, laid everything out for the cuts and the bends and everything. And, made the coupons according to D11 and went through the whole process. Got everything bent up, and then we went back to the conference room and we went through the rest of the QA manual. And I mean, he checked everything, the all the calibrated equipment, the gauge blocks.
Yeah.
Like you had way more in there than somebody would actually need, I think. But it's good because I find that, I may not need that equipment per code or, per spec, but I've got it there and I utilize it all the time. Especially with the gauge block set. I would have never thought about having a set of gauge blocks in there. I would have just bought a calibrated, gal gauge or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when's it out of cal? But a lot of the stuff that we do as an ATF, I think is, probably more than is necessary. But, the whole key to it is maintaining some consistency, making sure that we do everything the same every time. And I can tell you straight up, I've failed that more than once. I've made mistakes. I'm the one that wrote the manual, and I've, forgot stuff that I didn't forget it, but overlooked it. It wasn't sticking out at me like I needed it to. But, the gauge blocks, like I said, that was the easiest way to say this gal gauge is measuring 1/8 of an inch, but the whole calibration system, I think the QC47, the newer standards, use some different wording in it. I'm hoping it's more relaxed. I was actually looking at it earlier, but when it gets down to it, your calibrated welding machine, that's nice, but in reality, to me, an AWS certified welder test, I take all the numbers and dials off the machine. Now make me a weld, because which one is going to actually test the skill of the welder? The guy that can remember that, he can't run over 250 inches a minute of wire uphill with a MIG gun, or the one that says, hey, I've got too much, I need to turn it down.
Yeah.
There's a, that following a WPS, that's all great. But in the industries that I've worked in over the years, my most money that I made as a welder, they never brought me a WPS. That was the secret QC in the office. AI got to touch it, that kind of stuff. It wasn't actually put in the hands of the welder. They just told me to go weld it and make it pass X-ray.
Yeah, make it stick.
Yeah.
That was, I want to say, like the whole time that I went through the industry prior to getting into instruction, hell, I didn't know what a WPS was until I think I sat for the CWI seminar after I'd gotten out of industry and when I got into welding instruction. And I sat through the CWI seminar as a section rep, and I was like, what's a WPS? Oh, there's actually, there's a form I'm supposed to follow to make these welds. Oh, okay. Yeah. I had no idea.
It was a shock for me. I started off in the Navy. So in our training, we literally had a stack of code books that were that thick. We had 1688, no strain to 1689, what they called 248, 278, and one called 250, 1500 that was literally about that thick. It was for nuke welding. So we were trained on WPSs. So we had a work package. I could go put in 2 socket welds, carbon steel socket welds on some condensate lines or drain lines or steam lines. And there's literally a package that thick with a step-by-step instruction that said, using the hand grinding method, grind the socket weld down to a blue line. Have a QA inspector come verify that it's blue line and then break the joint. And I'd sign for it. So we had WPSs. So when I got out of the Navy, I went on my first boiler job, and we're slag welding tubes out. I ain't even seen a WPS yet, And the engineer for the boiler company comes by, and he's looking at the welds on the membrane, stuff like that. And he says something about the undercut. Yeah, I said, I think ASME allows 10% of the wall thickness, something like that. He said, oh, have you seen ASME Section 1? I said, yeah. I said, we did some work, some of that in the Navy, and had to look at the code books. He said, well, you want a QC? So that was my first boiler job I ever went on as a civilian. And then they put me to QCing with them. And that was when I realized, that the welders didn't actually get the WPS, because I asked him, I said, I've been out here welding for you guys for a week. I said, you never gave me a WPS. Oh, that just stays in the office. But actually that company did do a good job of informing the welders about what was on them. But I've seen some other ones, it was just welded up. With regular carbon steel, pretty forgiving. But like I said, a lot of those things are taken for granted in some industries, and other industries they're never even noted. They're not even part of the industry.
Yeah.
I have people call up all the time. Can you certify my welders so we can meet the requirements of D1.1? I said, there's that many pages in D1.1 about welder testing. The book's that thick. I said, what about all that other stuff? Oh, we just need certified welders. I said, no. I said, I don't think, I probably talked I've talked companies out of doing welder testing for them because I tell them, I said, look, if you're going to do D1.1 work, you need to have a code book.
Yep.
And that was, and I was kind of adamant about that, unless they made handrails or something like that. And even then I tell them, I said, look, I said, they're going to, sooner or later, someone's going to write a spec that says your handrail's got to be fabricated for D1.1. Now all of a sudden you're doing tubular welds.
Yeah, I dealt with a company just like that, and I said, it says right here on the prints that shall conform to D11. I said, do you have a copy of D11? Well, no. I said, okay. I sent him a link. I was like, here, buy this book. Become an AWS member first because you're going to get a discount. But buy this book and call me back once you own it, and I'll walk you through a lot of the stuff that you're going to need to know. So now, when you were in the Navy, what did your school consist of? I mean, does everybody go through, qualified to weld on nukes, or you separate into specialties or anything like that?
So we started out with what they call the hull maintenance technician. Now the Navy's changed now. It's a kinder, gentler Navy, I'm sure, because it was a long time ago when I was in. But so I qualified to get into they call it the hull maintenance technician program based on ASVAB scores. So your ASVAB score would select what jobs you were eligible to go to school for, and the higher your score was, and the more likely you were to get your choice. So I had the choice, and I told them, I said, I want to be a welder. So they signed me up. I went down there and went to the recruiting station, and he told me about all these different jobs that were doing it. And I said, I want this one here, this hull maintenance technician. That's what it was called, HT. So they signed me up, and then my recruiter called me a little while later. Said, hey, we want you to be what's called a machinist mate. They weld on submarines. I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, well, you got to go take a math test. I said, a math test? He said, yeah, your ASVAB on your math was low. You got to have, algebra, calculus, this kind of other stuff. I said, well, I'll go take that. So I went and took it, and they said I'd have to come in on a math waiver. I said, I'll just do that other one. Well, I come to find out after I got in the Navy, recruiters are like car salesmen.
Oh, yeah.
No, if their mouth is moving, be real careful. But I come to find out later that the nuclear machinist mates, the other job that I tested for, they actually operated the nuclear power plant. So it's a good moneymaker. But everything that they welded, we cut it out when they got back. They only did emergency repair welds. The valve was leaking, you go weld it up, get back, and then the real welders would cut it out and put it in right. So our school consisted of 11 weeks of what they call nuclear biological chemical training for radiation and chemical hazards, stuff like that, and then also metalworking. So the metalworking was sheet metal layout, pipe layout, doing hot bends, sand packed pipe for hot bends on templates, stuff like that, and then basic welding. Then after that basic course was over, then we started our actual welding course. Those people that started out in the basic welding class, not all of them got to go to the nuclear power plant program. Nuclear power plant components welder program was 30 weeks long altogether, and it was 8 hours a day. It was out in San Diego. So you had one core, the first course called 025, that was all aluminum MIG at first, and then stick welding was 7018, then 11018, and then after that you went on to the high pressure pipe, which was carbon steel and chrome moly and carbon moly, 7080 B2 or 70S2, 80S B2L, 90 B3 or 9018 B3, all done in a restrictor box. Everything was done with like 12-inch access on one side, 12-inch access on another side, and weld center line 6 inches off a wall.
Damn.
So it was it was an adventure. It was. So the first course was 6 weeks long. That was the basic welding. The high pressure plate and pipe was 10 weeks long. And the nuclear power plant components course is when we started doing. We did carbon steel, stainless steel, Inconel, nickel copper, and copper nickel. And we did all of our roots with what they call consumable inserts. They call them EB rings. They're basically just an inverted T insert that you fuse over, and it melts and comes back out in your root. But after that, it was getting out there in the fleet and welding, and I was lucky. I got to go to a frontline submarine tender that was over in Scotland. So we were, one of the closest commands to Russia at the time is the Cold War era. So we had a whole bunch of submarines. So it was like 712s was common. When I first got out of the Navy, you couldn't run me off overtime job. I said, you guys are going to give me extra money for this?
Wait, you're only working 712s?
Yeah. I've been doing this for less than minimum wage for 4 years.
Yeah, right.
but it was a good program. But one of the things about the welding education or welding in general, I tell my students, look, I said I took 3 hours of welding for 3 years in high school at Kingsbury Bowtech in Memphis, and when I went to the Navy, I didn't know how to weld. I finished up Navy C1 welding school for nuclear power plant components welder, and I went to my first step, and I didn't know how to weld. I fixed nuclear power plants on submarines. I welded on missile tubes, support structures, hull structures, nuclear power plant piping. I did steam generator repairs. And I got out of the Navy and I went to my first civilian job, and I didn't know how to weld. It's a lifelong learning experience. I went on my first civilian job after I got out of the Navy, besides working in the machine shop, was for a company doing some Schedule 10 piping. I went over and he was a 4-inch Schedule 10 pipe. He said, "Go ahead and put a root in this." I said, "All right." So I put it, and I was like 25, so I knew everything there was to know about welding. All I had to do was ask.
Right.
And I put a root in it, and he come over there, and he was like 10 foot from it. He said, "That's pretty rough." I thought he was just messing with me because I was young, I said, "Rough?" He said, "Well, you just go ahead and fill it out and cap it, and I'll come back and look at it." I said, "All right." So I filled it out, capped it. He come over and he got about 10, 15 foot. He said, "That ain't gonna work." I said, "What do you mean it ain't gonna work?" I said, "Well, that's just a little inconsistent." I said, "What do you want it to look like?" And he pointed at one where somebody walked a cup on it. I said, "That was done with an orbital welder. I never seen anybody walk a cup. There was no such thing as walking a cup on submarine. Okay, everything had to be free-handed. You didn't have the room." He said, "Show me how you welded that." I said, "All right." So I put my fingers on the bottom of it. I said, "Just like that." He said, "Oh, you're hired." And they hired me and put me up in a pipe rack. And all I was doing was joining all the pipe together. Nobody could walk a cup around. So, but I mean, it's a lifelong learning experience. Every time you go on another job, there's something new to learn. That's kind of why it's kind of cool.
That's been my second tagline lately is the more I learn about welding, the more I realize I don't know anything about welding.
Yeah. Yep. It's a never ending, learning experience. And if you want to do the actual welding by hand, it's a learning experience, a practice experience. If you want to get into inspection, there's always something new to learn. If you want to get into engineering, it's just so much out there. It's amazing. I can remember when I was a kid, this was my favorite book right here. You won't be able to tell. It's the AWS Welding Handbook, okay, which they didn't look like this at the time. But I read that thing probably from cover to cover. But, by the time I was 22 or 23. And when I say read it, I meant browsed through it, looked on every page, read the words that I could understand. And then as the years progressed, I started understanding more of the words that I read in there, because I got exposed to some of that stuff. And, it's lifelong, man. You can just keep on learning, or you can just kind of cruise and have fun. I ain't decided which one I'm going to do yet.
You're still young.
I'm still young. I'm still 60. I'm still getting around.
But I mean, like we were talking about before the recording, it's a great industry to get into, because you're never going to master it. I don't care what process you're working on, what alloy, what industry, you're never going to master it. There's always going to be something new or, something you don't know.
Yeah. Once you think you know it all, or you've learned everything you've learned, it's probably time to get out. I mean, that's the way it is. One of the reasons I wanted to teach high school was I ran into a lot of welding instructors over the years that were old retired guys from industry. They worked 20 years at this plant or that plant. Well, they had a limited amount of experience, and sometimes they took that job because they were looking for their retirement gig. I mean, I was looking for I want to share what I know about welding gig if I want to. But there's so many more things to learn. I feel bad for my students because there's things I don't know how to do. It's such a big, wide industry, and no single instructor is going to know all the stuff that there is. It's just. But again, if you can get them interested in the fire, watching the puddle, and get that awe feeling when you drop your hood, and you see that molten metal, then it'll happen for them.
Yep. I would kind of tell them, at the beginning of the program, say, hey, this program's 22 weeks, and if you take the advanced course, you're looking at a total of 44 weeks before you get out in industry. You're going to be in here welding every single day, 6 hours a day, 4 days out of the week. We're just going to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
like I still don't know everything I need to, but I'm gonna like try to help you out the best I can, get you interested in it. I'm gonna do a mental brain dump of everything I know over the the course of the time that you're here, and we're just gonna be barely scratching the surface. And you're gonna learn every day the rest of your life as long as you stay in this industry. There's still stuff that I don't know. There's still stuff that I won't know. Some of my mentors have forgotten more about welding than I'll ever know. But it's really cool to be able to share that experience with other people and say, hey, look, like here's welding's done so much for me throughout, the course of my life. It's provided me with a great trade that, I know so many people that dread waking up in the morning because they have to go to a job that they hate to perform work that they hate.
Yeah.
And they're miserable and they live for the weekend. They're like, oh man, like I can't wait till Friday.
Yeah.
Well, why? What happens on Friday? Well, I don't have to work anymore. Oh, okay, cool. Like I'm not worried. I like half the time I don't even know what day of the week it is. I got to look at my calendar. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, it's Friday. Cool. Back to work tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, we had eighth graders come through every semester or so, and they would come in, and I'd ask them. I said, "How many of y'all ever seen some old person say they didn't want to go to work that day, and didn't want a job, didn't want to go to work, didn't like their job?" Oh, they'd raise their hand. I said, "Look," I said, "I'm not like that." I said, "And a lot of the people that are into welding, they like it. They enjoy that work. We have some bad times, but it's fun to get up in the morning." I said, "How many of y'all play with fire? That's just some." I said, "Go ahead, I ain't gonna snitch you out." And then they'd raise their hand up. I said, "They give me really, really good money to do it." I said, "So if you can find something, if you can find something you enjoy doing, I was born broke and naked. So no matter how much money I make or don't make, I'm winning big right now anyway.
Right.
I'm way ahead of how I started this gig out. So I might as well do something that I kind of enjoy and share it with people. And I said, I drop my hood and see the fire. I can remember welding boiler tubes the first time I started welding water wall tubes. And the fellow I was talking about, earlier, just drop my hood, go around this thing and think, these people are paying me for this. They're giving me really good money. And all I have to do is watch that molten puddle all the time and make sure it goes in the right place. And they're going to pay me for it. Man, it's cool.
It's crazy how that works out, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun too. And when I like the fact that it's always a challenge. Whether it's a different weldment, it's restricted access, it's a different type of material. It's a process that it may not be you may not have a lot of skill in that process, or it could be troubleshooting the equipment. Like I really enjoy that part, especially when I go into a shop. You look like a rock star when you're like, drive rolls are loose or wrong drive rolls in it. How'd you know that? Your wires are slipping.
Wrong drive rolls in your drive rolls are too tight and you're smashing your flux core wire and you turn it into an egg and it won't feed good. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just like, oh wow, we didn't know that. Now I feel special. It's the stuff that was in my textbook in high school. But and that's where that's where all the variations in how much we learn and how much we can share with people changes so much. Sometimes you're not. I can remember not growing up, but working with other welders, you couldn't get nothing out of them. Some of them would share stuff with you, but there's, even the bad stuff that gets shared. Even if I tell somebody something wrong, once they go out there and prove it that it's wrong, they're gonna remember it for the rest of their lives. If I show them something and it's not the best way, they'll come back and tell me later, oh, that wasn't a good way to do it. Here's how I do it. Try it out. There's so many variables out there of what we do. And, everybody wants to be an expert especially on social media. It's so easy to get slammed because your weld doesn't look like everybody else's on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. When a lot of those people that are looking at that have never laid underneath a, hydraulic pump with hydraulic fluid going down the back of your neck and the thing vibrating so bad that your puddle actually is hard to watch. It's hard to look at. I've welded on stuff where the vibration was so bad it would crack as it was cooling, even though it was regular old steel. It just was at the perfect frequency to, as it solidified, pass through a critical frequency that would cause it to crack. But again, there's, it's real easy to sit back and judge and listen to someone's weld and say, oh, that looks terrible. I could have done better than that.
by all means, come come at it.
Till you get in those shoes, you got to be careful. I tell folks, I said I make some ugly welds in some easy places. I've made some slick ones in some pretty hard places. It kind of goes both ways sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot of keyboard CWIs out there, but they don't understand the environment, exactly what you're doing, what you're going through, where where that spot is. And at the end of the day, a lot of people post their stuff just to show somebody else what they're doing, to get somebody interested in it, to share that knowledge. Yes. Or, like, hey, I screwed up, here's how I messed up. Try to avoid doing it like this. I think I kind of lucked out when I was growing up, coming up through the industry. I mean, I did run into those people that, they didn't want to share anything with you because they were afraid that, well, if I show you this, somebody's going to end up you're going to replace me, and, they'll send me down the road. But I had a lot of good mentors when I was coming up that showed me not always what to do, but, sometimes what not to do. Sometimes that's just as important as learning what to do, is learn what not to do. And I've got a young man that's, he hung out at my school today. He's taken a couple of my classes and everything. He's really interested in welding, and he's already got his high school diploma, but he's not able to enter the workforce because he's 16.
Oh, yeah.
But he's graduated. So, I mean, like, we're trying to work on some different things and get him out into industry somehow, get him involved. But I was going through and, we're just fabricating a couple of, stands for the weld booths and some other miscellaneous stuff around the shop that need fixing and, welding and repairing and fabricating. Yeah. And he's like, why are you doing this? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, why did you let me come into the school today to show me how to do this stuff and give me booth time and, allow me to come in and practice and stuff? And I said, well, somebody did this for me. Yeah. Actually, several people did this for me when I was coming up as a young welder. So I want to provide that same opportunity to as many people as I can, because that's launched me on a different trajectory in life. The fact that they took time and interest in me and shared their skills, their craft, their knowledge, their abilities, that set me on a fast track.
Yeah.
And I just want to pay that forward. And hopefully one day when you get into a position and you've got a bunch of knowledge in your head and somebody, finds interest in what you're doing, that you'll do the same thing and you're going to share it on and pass it on to them as well.
The interest thing is such a big part. I was talking about my welding teacher earlier. He was an aviation guy, so there's a lot of things he didn't know. But one of the things that he did know was that I was interested in welding, and he supported that. I mean, he encouraged me. He said, he'd tell me, he said, look, I don't know how to do this, but we'll find somebody that does, or we'll look it up, and here's a resource you can look at. Here's a book. But him supporting my interest was a big part of me deciding this is what I'm going to do for my, rest of my life. I mean, I kind of knew when I was 16 years old, I was going to weld, which was, everybody thinks a 16-year-old is just making up stories, but I knew this is what I want to do. I could drop my hood to see the fire, and I think I want to do this. This is fun. I couldn't walk by anything that was welded without looking at it. I can remember seeing those pipes that they put around the gas pump. 4-inch or 6-inch pipes, they'll wrap around them sometimes to protect them from getting hit. I'd see those welds on there. I think, man, I want to do something cool like that one day. That was my dream weld, is I want to be able to weld on something that people will actually see. And so, it's just such a cool environment to work in, my opinion.
Yeah, I caught the bug. Same thing. I think I was 15 years. I think I was 15. I remember it was the summer of my 9th grade year, and I watched my dad cut a piece of chain with an oxy fuel torch, and I thought that was just the coolest thing I had ever seen. And to get a young teenage boy's attention, on work is one thing, and so I signed up for welding classes the following term in my 10th grade year, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, okay, cool, I got this oxyacetylene welding thing down packed. And
that's how we had to start.
I was like, I'm going to be a welder, and I had no idea. I walked through the shop. I think I was going back to grab some more flux or a handful of rods or something, and I see my welding instructor, and he's got like this weird apparatus in his hand, and he's putting these, gray rods in this, whatever this thing is he's got in his hand, and he starts welding with it, and I'm like, what is that? He's welding with electricity. I thought you just do it with fire in a rod and a little bit of flux. And he's like, oh, this is stick welding. I was like, well, what's that? And so, like, every process that I got introduced into, I was like, what? But wait, there's more? And it just kept continuously feeding that fire, no pun intended, as to the capabilities and possibilities that welding can offer. I mean, if you think about like any of the other trades, I mean, a lot of plumbers, they're dealing with specific diameters of PVC pipe or maybe a little bit of copper. Okay, like that's pretty isolated. They got a small selection of tools. Same thing with an electrician. They keep everything on their pouch or in a little backpack. They don't have a menagerie of things. But once you get into fabrication, I mean, you've got gang boxes upon gang boxes of specialty tools for, different fit ups and layout and all this different stuff. And it's just really cool because you're just slowly peeling back another layer of that massive onion.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about how many different things. You've got the just put the fire in your hands and make welds. That's great. I love it. And you've got layout and fabrication. My first experience doing any layout was actually in high school. We had I can remember my textbook. I know the author's name on it. Giotino, Weeks, and Bruin was their name. It was an orange textbook. But anyway, in it had parallel line development for piping. Showed how to do saddles and miter joints. So they wanted us to rebuild the handrail that was coming down from the main school to the VOTEC. Well, it was, inch and a half regular handrail pipe. But I had to make all the uprights and cope those out and make all the miter joints and cut those. And I did that all using the layout stuff that was in that book on how to do parallel line development and, make a flat stretch out, draw it all out with a compass and, take dividers and set it up into 16 equal segments and make the wrap around and cut all the pipes with it. And that was, I thought that was just the coolest thing that I could make that. All the other stuff that I learned in school, except for reading, was no longer of any value to me. It really wasn't. Besides basic math. My last math year in high school was ninth grade, because in Tennessee at that time you only had that 1 year. We started doing algebra and we started coming up with answers that still had variables in them. And I said, I don't need this.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I had, but in theory there was no application for it. If I'd have known that 20 years later I was trying to write a computer program in GW Basic to calculate how much weld there is based upon the width of a cap and the height of the reinforcement, I'd have wished I'd have taken some algebra and some trigs in. But it took me quite a while to figure that one out on my own. But there's just so much stuff to learn, and you just touch the tip of it. But it's cool to share. It's cool to see other people get interested in it and see them kind of grow with it. And, everybody talked about the youth of today. When I took this job teaching high school, 4 years ago, oh, you're not going to like kids of today. They're way different. They want to be interested in something. They want somebody to care about what they're doing, and they want to do something that they can get good at. And I'm thankful that I didn't have a classroom full of me, to be honest with you. So the school up here in Northeast Tennessee is definitely way different than it was in Memphis in 1980.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I mean, you think about it. I think the students are still the same as far as like human beings. It's a completely different environment. There's a lot of other things going on right now, a lot of different distractions. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're still 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. I mean, that fundamentally, that's really not going to change. And if you can find a way to interest them and nurture that flame, you've got their attention. They're going to put down that cell phone. They're going to put all that stuff aside. And you can really change somebody's life at that point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I want the welding class to be the happy place for them during the day. I want to look forward to coming to that. Like I said, I'm gonna miss it when I leave it, but hopefully I've made an impression on some of them that they'll want to share later when they grow up, and become a teacher. And it's very, very rewarding. The teaching part of it is, the education part's not.
Right. Now you do like workshops throughout the year too, right? Or like during the summer and stuff for other educators, like.
Yeah, during the summer, I've done a couple welding instructor workshops. I've done 3 of them each summer. Sometime in June, we'll have a group of welding instructors come together, and we would talk about, how do we teach, how to become ATF, how to do welder testing. So I would do like a Monday would be talking about how we teach theory information. Talk about using Miller Open Book. Talk about using LMS. I use Moodle and Canvas and stuff like that, and try to figure out a way to make it easy to share the information with the students besides just a textbook. And then the second day on Tuesday, we would do a hands-on type stuff. So I have, you know, one time Lincoln Electric came in and demonstrated their C300s and some silicon bronze. You know, we played around with some of that equipment, but we would basically talk about how do we teach theory. You know, my thought is, oh, do the basics really, really good a whole lot of times. You know, so when I first started teaching, I would make my students do a pad weld for the entire semester. And I've changed that a little bit now, but I still make them, that's still their go-to. My introduction to welding students, they just did their final exam today, is a pad weld. They get one try. That's what's going to be graded. Shows me they can stack some beads together. They're still done other stuff through the semester. But anyway, you know, I would build off of that and tell the other instructors this is why I do it. And they would tell me, well, maybe you should mix it up a little bit. And I've kind of progressed over that. I now have all my students, they never practice fillet welds per se, but we would have a contest once a week where I'd cut them up enough pieces for 6 T-joints and say, here, make fillet welds in this. I'd demonstrate how to do it. Let them do it, you know, have a contest. So it's, you know, but the instructor conference was kind of cool because I got to see how some other people taught and then get some feedback on how I taught, because I was making it up. It's kind of like when we was talking earlier about the ATF manual. I made it up on my own. Doesn't mean it's any good. And the same thing with how I teach. You know, it's just like welding. It's a lifelong learning experience. You know, I do things different now than I did 4 years ago. And it's, you know, hopefully it's to the, you know, better for the students.
Yeah, I remember walking in the first day that I had to teach welding, and very similar. Like I literally had to make it up as I went along, because I think they hired me in December, like late December, you know, to start setting up the lab and everything, and then class was starting early January, and so I was like, okay, I'm walking in. This program hasn't been up and running in the past 15 years, so it's not like here's the curriculum, you know, here's the syllabus, here's the guidelines, here's what you do on day one. Like I had none of that, so I just kind of made it up as I went along. I was like, okay, let's, you know, make sure that the horse is in front of the cart here. Let's talk about weld safety. So, I mean, that was day one. And then we got into padding beads, and then we started getting into fillet welds, and it just kept progressively getting better and better. And, you know, the students prior to me, you know, leaving the college, they were like, every class would always see me ordering new equipment or materials, or, you know, trying to develop new lesson plans for the next class coming in. And they're like, man, that, you know, that sounds cool, or it looks cool. I wish we could have done that while we were here. You know, I want to come back and take your class again. And I said, well, the best thing you could do is take the last class I ever teach. I said, because by then, hopefully I've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's just like welding. It's a constant state of progression. You know, like you're learning every semester that goes by, every term, every group of students. You know, everybody's got different learning styles, and you start incorporating different things in every class. Like I would always tell the students, like, you're going to learn a ton of information while you're here, but I'm going to learn just as much from you as you are from me. You know, because maybe somebody's got a different learning style, and I learned to work with that student a little bit better this time. Well, the next time I run across that same learning style, I've got a better understanding of how to address that, because not everybody's going to learn the same. You've probably noticed, you know, the same thing with different students. You get a new student in, you're like, oh, I had a student 3 years ago that was, you know, he was doing that exact same thing. I know exactly how to fix that. You know, change your rod angle, or, you know, do this, or, you know, post up on the bench there a little bit. Here's exactly how you fix that. And it's because you've learned that from previous experience with other students. So you just keep building on that and just putting more tools in your toolbox.
Yeah. One of the things that I do with mine, and I haven't done as much this quarter or this semester because I kind of know I'm on the way out, but I do surveys with them. So I'll send them anonymous surveys, Google forms, and ask them, you know, different things. What could the instructor do different, or have you been treated respectfully? And you know, a pretty good series of questions that kind of gives me some good feedback. And then, you know, what suggestions do you have for going forward that I could help you better, and that kind of stuff. And that stuff, it's been good information. It's helped me. You know, that was one of the things besides the instructor conference that kind of got me to change my mind about just having to do pad welds. You know, but I did that so they could weld a whole lot. You know, one of the things, you know, a lot of teachers do projects, for instance. And projects are great, don't get me wrong. But projects will attract everybody in the shop to go see what you're doing. You know, you pull a trailer in, everybody's going to learn how to fix a trailer. but ain't nobody gonna learn how to weld. I mean, that's just the way that it is, you know. And so my focus was primarily on art time and not necessarily teaching fabrication skills. And I don't want to belittle fabrication, but I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide to understand square, plumb, and level. That's the majority of fabrication. You know, the only thing I've got to know after that is hot metal is bigger than cold metal. And I have now mastered fabrication, you know, for the most part. And I know some folks who disagree with that. But again, I can fabricate and fit. I can stand next to you and tell you what to do. You ain't got to put your hands on it. I can stand next to you and tell you what to do to lay a bead. You can't do it. You know, you can, but I mean, like I said, someone that didn't have that skill or ability. So I tried to focus mainly on the art time, and that was one of the, like I said, one of the things that with the instructor conferences that I'd have. Some of those instructors that came to the instructor conference, some of them didn't have any welding skill. They had great teaching skills. Some of them were fabricators. So we got to share that information, and it's pretty useful. I really enjoyed the instructor conference. I never got to go to the one that AWS had.
It's not too late.
Well, I'm not an instructor after this month, so.
Well, you're not an instructor at that school, but I mean, you still teach, you still educate.
Yeah, I'll be a welding teacher my entire life if I can get anybody to sit still long enough to let me talk to them about it. Grab their hands and say, "Here, this is how we do this. You want to play with fire?"
Because you could still qualify for the Instructors Institute as like a private instructor.
I might can. I've been nominated for it. You know, I'm the AWS section chairman, and so I've been to the district conferences, and I think my name has come up once or twice to go down there, and I couldn't do it once or twice. It interfered with my instructor conference, or interfered with skills, I think, or something like that. But I heard it's pretty good event. Mine was just a little rinky dink, a bunch of welding instructors from Northeast Tennessee. Actually, we had a guy come from, I don't know, somewhere above the Mason-Dixon line, but he flew down or drove down and come down, and he was good to have. They enjoyed it. But like I said, instructors, you know, none of us know everything. So to me, getting together and networking is valuable. You know, how do you do this? How do you get a student out of the habit of trying to weld out here with one hand because he saw it on YouTube, somebody putting a root in a pipe. Now all of a sudden he thinks he can weld everything one-handed like they do on YouTube, you know. So
yeah, I did a couple of them up at the Lincoln Electric. They've got the educator workshop, the advanced educator workshop.
Yeah.
I did the Instructors Institute with AWS. I did a couple with Ryan Eubank. I wanted to get up to yours, but I think I had conflicting dates the last time you ran yours. But they're all invaluable simply for that networking aspect.
Yeah.
Because you can't know everything. And when you think you've got something figured out, you got a topic and you're like, I've mastered the way of teaching this. Somebody in the group puts a different spin on it and you're like, wow, I never looked at it that way. And, you know, then you get that eureka moment, the same one that your students get, you know, when they lay that first bead down and get that slag peel or something like that. You're like, oh, it just clicks. And you go back and reevaluate and make everything better. But, I mean, those workshops are so invaluable for educators. I know Weld Ed does one once a year, or they might do it a couple times a year, but it's like $99. And you cover your travel and all that stuff, and it's like a whole week of stuff. That's another one I've been wanting to get up to. But I mean, anybody that's listening, if you're a welding educator, try to get out to any of these welding educator workshops, because just the networking aspect alone, having a group of people to be able to lean on, because that was my biggest thing when I got into teaching. I didn't know any other teachers in the area. And when I started finding out, you know, okay, this person teaches over here and this is their phone number, they kind of didn't want to share information with me either, because they're like, oh, you're at a competing school.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you got to get that mentality out of your head, because you can only take so many students at one time. I can only take so many students at one time. Let's help each other become better so that we make better educated welders all throughout Central Florida. Yeah. Let's work together here.
Has nothing to do with how your school performs. It's how you can help students that are interested in welding perform.
Yep.
I mean, you know, I when I first moved here, I said I left industry 10 years ago to come teach, and I worked for a community college. And they were adamant about me not going down to the school that I teach at right now and talking with that instructor. I mean, I'm talking about to the point where my boss was tight, clenched jaw. Do not go down there and talk to Don Saunders. He was the instructor before I got there. And I went down there on an open house. They had open house one time. So I'm going to go down there and check it out, you know. And I went down there and talked to him. And so and he had his own opinion about our organization too. But like I said, we hit it off because he knew, we both knew we were interested in teaching students how to weld. Period. And that's the thing that we have in common. I think sometimes like I said, we're like some old welders. We don't want to share our stuff, and then sometimes it may be intimidating. I may call you up and say, "Hey, I'd love to come talk with you about welding," and sometimes people can confuse my enthusiasm with maybe me thinking I know it all, and I don't. I tell people, I said, don't confuse my enthusiasm with skill or ability. It's just I'm excited to share this with somebody if they'll listen or show me that I'm wrong. I mean, you can't beat being wrong for a learning experience.
You'll never
Tell me
forget
something
it.
better. No. So it's a the welding instructors getting together now. I actually I had a kind of a vision of getting welding instructors organized. During COVID, I held multiple. I don't know if you attended any of the Zoom meetings or not. I held multiple Zoom meetings once a month during COVID to just get instructors together to network. And then I actually started a website called weldinginstructors.org and tried to put some of those videos on there just to share that information that we had that we talked about. And it was it kind of fizzled out, but it was great having those meetings and talking about how we did things. But the website, I store the videos on there, and then gave everybody an option to make comments and stuff like that, and it went on pretty good for a while. Then when it slowly started to fizzle out just a little bit, I think when COVID started to ramp down, and it wasn't as important to get online as it was to get out there and do stuff. But the things that were learned and things that were talked about, realizing everybody else is going through some similar struggles about trying to, how do you teach students? How do you do this? How do you do that? It was great. But I think I had probably eight or so of those Zoom meetings with instructors from all over the country. As a matter of fact, one of them, a lady contacted me yesterday through LinkedIn. That was one that I invited back in 2019, sometime late 2019. And she said, don't know if you remember or not. You invited me to a meeting. She's out in Southern California. And yeah, I do remember that because they were actually going to travel to the instructor conference that I had that first June in 2019 when COVID was kind of still going. We're still going to have the welding instructor conference, or not 2019, 20. It would have been 2020, I guess. So there's so much value in networking. If you can share some information, it's not really about networking. So I can call you up to get a job. It's me being able to call you up and say, hey, I've got a student that's doing this and I can't figure out how to help them out, or I can't weld with this process. You got any tips to help me so I can help them?
No, but I mean it's great to have that resource to be able to lean on someone. And I know you also put together so I missed your conferences during COVID because, like I said, we met post COVID.
Yeah.
But I know, like, shortly after you and I linked up, I found your group on Facebook as well, because you still continuously do these Zoom classes, right? Periodically?
Every once in a while, I would try to do them. I recently did one on one of the CWI groups on there. I did it yesterday just to talk about welding. I saw a question post about welder certification on one of the CWI groups, and just said if anybody wants to do a Zoom meeting, we can get together and talk about it. And of course, everybody wanted to, but then I think 7 or 8 people showed up last night to listen and to talk a little bit. But yeah, I still try to. I'm gonna still continue to teach whatever way I can. I figure God has blessed me with being interested in the trade and have enough interest to maybe learn a little bit of stuff. And I think it's my job to share some of it if it can help somebody out. It's been really, really good to me. I can't. Said my welding teacher in high school, he and I became close friends. He's passed on, but he supported my interest. And like I said, that's one of the reasons I wanted to be a high school welding teacher. It was actually my dream job. And I aspired to do it from like right after I got out of the Navy. I was wanting to do it. Then I realized you had to have a degree and you had to do this and do that. And I said, well, I'll just go to work. And then when I finally rolled around to this opportunity, I was loving it. But again, I still love teaching high school kids. That's my favorite. I'd rather teach high school kids than anybody else. It's just unfortunate that I have to work in the high school education world to do it.
Yeah, that's the hard part. That's the stick with the carrot.
Yeah, like I said, tell everybody it's not them, it's me. It's my inability to be flexible that's more the problem. I mean, because the world of education is going to be the world of education no matter what. I'm not going to influence it. And unfortunately, I'm probably not going to change some thoughts on some stuff either.
No, but I mean, you still have the opportunity to give back and share your knowledge and all that. I mean,
Oh
none
yeah,
of that's going away. So I mean, you still got the passion to
I've
be
got
able to do it.
I've got past students that have keys to my shop. They just go over there and practice when they come in off the job, or I've got three I think that graduated within the last 3 years. That I made them a copy of my key and said, here, if you need to go weld, go weld. If you need some help, holler at me. I'll come try to help you. Of course, most of them it's the other way around. They could probably come help me now.
But that's the goal. That's kind of one of the things we were talking about before we hit the record button is, when my students leave the program, I want them to be better at welding than I am. Because I mean, especially after the end of 22 weeks, you've been practicing this stuff day in and day out. I might get 7, 8, 10 minutes of weld time per day, just going in and doing a quick demo here or there, straighten somebody's angle out. But I mean, you're in that booth 6 hours a day. You better be really good, within the next couple of months. I want you to weld better than I can.
Yeah. So that's my goal, is them to make them, and I do all of our, the little contests I was talking about. I judge them blind. So I'll make my weld, and as soon as I'm done, I won't chip the slag off. I said, somebody take it, go put my stencil on it. All my students have got a welder ID, and they put it on the bottom of it. So I'll grade them blind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whose is whose, and I can see them start to grinning when I've moved mine down the line from first place. They start smiling a little bit because they know they done beat me.
I should have tried that. I've never even thought of that.
Yeah, I do almost all my grading blind on welds.
I did that, but I've never thrown mine in the stack with it.
Oh yeah, I'll throw mine in the stack with it, quite a few times, more often than not. Just depending on what's going on and stuff like that. But like I said, sometimes I'll mix it up. I mean, if we're doing the vertical fillet weld, I'll do mine one-handed. And then I'll tell them, don't weld one-handed unless you have to. So, or I'll use my left hand and use my offhand for something, or if I'm doing a T-joint down on the table, I'll do the back side of it instead of the front side of it. That kind of stuff. So, but like I said, now it's getting to where either I'm getting worse or they're getting better. I'm liking to think it's them getting better, but it could be the other way around.
I don't know. You're probably getting a lot more efficient at teaching. I mean, you just had that one student place nationals for skills.
Yep. She's going to go to the nationals. Yeah. Yep. And we talk about the different levels of training. There's so much farther to go, but yeah, she's got 90 hours with a beginning course, and then 90 hours in our beginning course all they do is MIG weld. So I start all my beginning students off MIG welding. And I know there's a lot of different opinions on that. You and I started off oxyacetylene welding. Well, there's not much value in that right now. Plus managing the gas and the manifold system, because that's quite an adventure. But then everybody says, well, we start off stick welding. Well, when I taught my child how to ride a bicycle, I started off with 3 wheels instead of 2. And MIG weld is pretty easy. But I mean, you can get students that in 90 hours of training have actually got entry-level job skills. They can decide at the end of 90 hours they hate welding. But anyway, she's got 90 hours of that, then 180 hours of partial MIG and partial stick, and then probably another 130 or 40 hours up to right now. So she's a beginner. There's less than 400 hours of welding training. That's a drop in the bucket. I had 1,300 hours of welding in high school myself, for 3 hours a day for 3 years. Plus I graduated with like 24 credits, and 14 or 15 of them were in vocational education of some type. Back then it was a little bit easier to get out with a little bit more. They didn't want everybody to be college ready. They wanted you to be ready to go to work. But yeah, she's going to go compete in the nationals. So I'm excited for her. And she's of the mindset. She just wants to weld. She wants to go weld in a different place. She's not, not very nervous about it. I think she kind of has taken on what I said about, earlier. We're doing something that the rest of the world doesn't do. There's no shame in going down there and losing, because there's always going to be somebody better than you. You just go down there and get the experience, realize that, hey, I could have done better, or I did my best and it wasn't good enough. You keep on playing with the fire. Because like I said, if you can enjoy dropping your hood and seeing that fire, all the other stuff going on around you, it doesn't matter. I tell people like about that doing a welding test. Everybody gets nervous about tests, and yeah, I've had some nervous ones. I mean, I've driven to West Texas for supposed big money jobs with $50 in my pocket and my wife and kids in the car, and busted out on a welding test. So I know what it's like to bust out on tests. So it can be a little nerve wracking. But the good thing about it, it's welding. I stopped somewhere else and welded on horse trailers for 2 days for $10 an hour. I got enough gas money to get back to Memphis. But that nervous thing, ain't no shame in it. There's spectators and there's participators in this welding thing. And if you get out there and participate in it, just go do it. Do the best you can. And if you don't ever get as good as somebody else, if you still enjoy it and you can make a living at it, keep on keeping on, man. Don't worry about what the guy next to you is doing. You just say, what can I do to make myself better?
That's a good way to look at it too, because I think a lot of times welders, speaking very generally, but like welders have a big ego. They want to be the best.
We got a right to, because like I said, we're different than everybody else. I said I'm not. There's some problems with pride. Don't get me wrong. But as far as working for a living, what we do is different than many, many other trades. It's a trade in and of itself, even though people don't want it to be, because we support so many other trades. But again, a good rigger, it's a great skill to have. Don't get me wrong. You can tell me what to do, I can do most of the rigging. Machinist. And there's great skills there. A lot of technical things to know. But a good machinist can stand next to me and tell me how to mill or turn apart. I'll probably be able to do it. I may not do it productively or efficiently or quickly. I'll be able to turn it the first time. Provided I use the right precautions and him and I can communicate. But welding, it ain't like that. You drop your hood every time. I could have made this weld 100 times, and if I let my mind wander, I don't pay attention, I can make it ugly.
And I could be right there in your ear telling you exactly what to do, and it may not work out.
It ain't right. It ain't gonna happen. I can give you all the instructions until you put your hood on and put your hands in it hundreds of times. You can't do it. So. Yep.
And it's hard to give feedback mid-weld to a student. I mean, like you've probably done that 100 times. Like, get closer, no, closer. And they got their hood on, the arc's going, they can't hear you. Your mouth's all muffled because you got the hood on. So, yeah, the feedback during the welding process isn't that great.
No, but it's but it does help. I mean, I actually do that. So I've got videos of me showing some people how to. The first thing any of my students ever welded on was TIG. Just because in my opinion, it's the easiest process to use. Hard stuff is done with it, but as far as manual dexterity, it don't get easier than your pencil muscles. So you've already got that. But anyway, I'll tell them get closer, get farther away. They do a little edge joint on the outside corner of two pieces of like 1/8 inch or 3/16 carbon steel, and just fuse it. So I'm talking to them, get closer, go more side to side, that kind of stuff. After a while, they'll think, oh, I've mastered this TIG welding. They've only made one joint.
Yeah.
I said, all right, I'm going to let you do one by yourself now, and I can talk to you. And it's a whole different world then.
Yep. Or you say, okay, that's step one. Now here's a piece of filler metal.
Yeah.
And then they don't know what to do.
So that's what they do before the beginning class, and they don't touch TIG again. Probably the majority of them actually don't TIG at all. I mean, I'll let some students that have got where they can be proficient with sticks in vertical and overhead, they'll start TIG welding some. But for the most part, it's hard to fit that into a 400 or 600 hour class that's spread out. 600 hours in a high school setting is not like 600 hours in a community college setting where you're doing it 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
When you're doing it for 1.5 or 2 hours a day, the learning curve is way different. That's one of the things that I think is an issue. If I grow up and have my own school in my own city, I would take 9th graders in that had a basic 8th grade math reading level, give them to me for 6 hours a day for 4 years, and they will be able to read, they will be able to write, they'll be able to balance a textbook, they'll be able to write a purchase order, they'll be able to read a project specification, all based off of that 8th grade reading level, and they'll be able to weld really, really good. But until I have a rich aunt pass away and leave me enough to buy my own city, I guess I'm stuck doing it like everybody else wants.
Yeah. We used to have the entrance exams for students coming into our program, and the recruiters would always come up to me and they're like, hey, this student has a sixth grade reading level and a seventh grade math level, and they're 24. Can they come into your program? I said, yeah, as long as they got blue jeans and work boots, send them on in, because we can build from there.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee if I show that student an application and why those skills are important or relevant, that's when it's going to click. All I got to do is get them to buy into this welding stuff, and I'm going to attract them with this really bright flame and arc over here. And once I can bring them in there with that, once I can get like a moth to a flame, if I can bring them in with that, then I can, we can start trading off. Okay, you got to get better at your math. We're going to start working on your fractions, and they're going to put in the time and the effort because they want to keep playing with that, bright ball of light.
Want to be able to do something with the fire. Yeah, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for English teachers. Okay, now I don't think that my senior year of English literature helped me any, but my ability to read and write grew because in welding class every day I would show up to my welding class in Memphis and I would look for a new welding journal. Okay, I thought the welding journal was the coolest thing. So I would wait for him to get that new welding journal every month, and I would go back and look through the old ones. I'd read through he had an old Jefferson's welding encyclopedia, and I'm looking at one right there. It's a much newer version.
Got mine over there.
Yeah, and the welding handbook and stuff like that, and that developed my reading skills. I was interested in reading stuff about welding. So I realized that with my students, if I could get them interested in not only just welding, but maybe learning some of the technical stuff in 10 years when they want to become CWIs, maybe they'll remember some of the stuff that, I taught them today, which we don't do a whole lot of serious stuff. It's kind of like a 20% or less of our time, because as a welder, if I go apply for a job as a welder right now, I've sent out a couple applications. I don't bother to even tell them I'm a CWI. Okay, because that foreman may not want me working for him. They don't want that. But then in some applications, it's good to have that. I've been at the end of the job as a welder, and all the welding was done. They said, "Hey, we need somebody to do P&ID walk down." I can do that. I can make you some cool sketches. I can write up reports. I can do all that stuff and get a little bit extra work out of it. So there's value in the academics too. But really, the ability to weld good. Some of the best welders I know, they don't need to read anything. Just drop that hood, make a weld, be done with it, walk on, go make another one. I've got to make up for some of my downfalls in welding with some of my knowledge about it. If I could weld as much as I knew about it, it'd be pretty slick.
Be a dangerous man.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
I know a lot about it, but I can just do it to get by. But it's fun getting by with it.
And it's a fun process. There is. Like if you look at it, every single day that I went to work, especially when I was doing ironwork, it wasn't always fun, But there was some bad times. There was some rough patches and stuff like that. But you look back, those are the times you remember, just because of the people that you're with, the work that you're doing, the task you were able to complete as a team, and that kind of makes some of those bad times turn into good ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of the people I've worked with in different jobs and stuff like that, and it goes back many years. And like I said, I've swapped back and forth between welding and inspection and teaching and stuff over the years. So like I said, I'm not great at any of it, but I can do them all. But I think back, I remember more about the actual jobs and the people that I worked with and the things that we went through. I can remember, I worked at a paper mill for 4 years doing maintenance. Some of the best hands I've ever worked with, pipe fitters, millwrights, and other welders and stuff like that. It wasn't nothing to get a call at 1 o'clock in the morning. Hey, come out and fix this thing, and then be there from 1 o'clock in the morning after you got off 4 o'clock the previous day until 4 o'clock the next day or later. But I was making that time and a half and that double time. So Mama got some new shoes out of the deal, but still the work. It was about we wanted to fix our plant because they gave us good money to be craftspeople there. So I wanted to fix it. I'm gonna fix it up. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make the leak stop. I'm gonna do that. And it's an interesting environment. I've had maggots the size of my pinky fall down the back of my shirt, working in grain mills. I'm talking about literally that big, and the grain would come out of the top of the silo. They're supposed to keep it all wetted down. Well, they keep wetting it down, eventually the critters start growing.
Mm.
And then every once in a while, one of them would come out, and I'd be down here welding the bottom of the silo and reach up there and grab it. There it is.
That's how I used to get welding outside and everything. For some reason, yellow jackets are attracted to that arc. And
Oh,
man, they
yeah.
get to buzzing around inside your welding hood. Oh yeah.
I've had them hit my lens and stink when they fall down. I worked at a place in Memphis that we built what they call steam trays for the cooking oil or for the oil industry for vegetable oils. But basically, they're just big 10, 12, 15-foot discs with a bunch of bolts throughout in a grid pattern holding them together. They call them stay bolts. But anyway, we'd weld those up, and I worked on night shift. And we would literally burn a full roll of 1/16-inch wire per welder per night, just making single V groove or a single bevel groove welds around this 1.25 inch stay bolt, just filling up those grooves. But anyway, you get out there at night at the right time, and the bugs would hit you in the lens so hard you'd feel them. It would knock them out,
Yeah.
and they would fall down in your puddle. Well, we're making welds. We're running 300, 350 amps after we get the root passing in. So you've got a puddle this wide, and that bug falls down into it while it's all molten. You got to gouge the whole thing out.
Cremated.
It fills up with frost and stank. Boy, it stunk.
I did
Yeah, right.
nighttime structural welding a couple times, and the June bugs would always, or the moths,
Yeah.
same thing. They smack it, smack like you're saying, smack you in the welding lens, and they'd fall in the puddle. You
Yeah.
just
I don't know
burn
if
right
they
over
saw the light there, and then they'd hit that and be right down in the puddle.
Yep.
But it's like I said, but all that stuff is, it's not all gravy, but to me, it's all when you look back on it. I mean, I've done way too many 30-hour days. When I was in the Navy, it was not unusual. Every third day, you worked 24 to 30 hours straight. And, after I got out, you couldn't run me off overtime, period. I would, as long as you'd let me stay, I'd get there. I mean, I worked outages at the paper mill, and I got 112 hours in a week. And I think, man, I'm tired. And then they gave me a paycheck. Oh, I can do this one more week.
Yeah, you're not too tired to go out and spend it.
No.
Like, man, I
No,
just got
so
a sudden burst of energy.
Yeah, I feel much healthier now.
Yeah.
But one of the things about it that I noticed my wife always tells me about it when I would go out and work, when you'd come back in off of that excitement, off of going out and working on a job, for me, I was kind of on a downhill slope just a little bit. It took me a little while to get my head back right after working 7/12 for 2 or 3 weeks to come back to, just being home. It was a big change for me. But it's still fun. I'm fixing to go back to it. This time I'm gonna make her go with me though.
There you go. This is my helper.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna bring her on the job as helper. She can sit in the hotel and crochet.
There you go. Well, Gerald, it's been an absolute pleasure. So before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? I know you've got different websites. You do some different classes and stuff. Where can everybody go about looking into that information?
Probably the easiest thing to do is you can just do a search for Gerald Austin and Welding, and one of my websites will come up. I've got one called weldingdata.com, and I'm a lot better at welding than I am at websites, so don't expect much because my welding kind of sucks still. But I got weldingdata.com. I've got Gerald at weldingdata.com is my email address. I own those domains, so I'll always have that email address till I die. Then I got another website called weldingclassroom.org. I got some Moodle sites on there, but LinkedIn, just do a search on LinkedIn, and my profile should come up. If you do a search for Gerald Austin and Welding, that'll be it. And that's, pretty easy way to get in touch with me. And if you want to, you can always call me and text me. Okay, if I'm ever a teacher for you, then you've got like a lifetime phone a friend. I give my students my cell phone number, even though I'm not supposed to. It's 423-914-1481. You can always text me with a question if you want to. If I can help you out, the biggest thing you've got to know if you ever contact me about welding is no one to tell me to shut up, because I do enjoy talking about it.
As long as they'll listen.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. But like I said earlier, don't confuse my enthusiasm with skill or ability. I'm excited about what I share with you, but I may be wrong. So just keep that in mind.
You've helped me out plenty of times.
Yeah, well, like I said, I enjoy it. It's been a really good trade for me. I said God's blessed me with enjoying to get up and go to work in the morning. I can't believe people have said, "Oh, you work hard," and as a teacher they don't say that much, but back when I was in the industry, "Oh, you work hard." I wasn't working hard. I was getting to do my hobby and play, and they gave me money for it. It was like getting up in the morning to go do the thing you enjoy. Someone's going to give you money. Have fun.
It's a great way to look at it.
If you can find whatever that job is, do it. It doesn't have to be welding, but welding's a good one for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thank you, sir.
Oh, man, I enjoyed it, man. Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this month's episode of Weld Wednesdays with AWS, brought to you by the American Welding Society. For more information on how you can get involved with AWS, just head on over to the website, aws.org. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.